Okay, good morning. Welcome. Welcome to the Fujita Hall. Welcome to the International Day of Peace. And welcome to the Fujita display. Thank you for coming with a public holiday tomorrow. And thank you for coming even though you probably know the Fujita story just as well as I do. So this year's International Day of Peace has the theme, End Racism, Build Peace. So I was thinking about how I might share the Fujita story with you just that little bit differently. I'll try and share some photos you might not have seen before and try to incorporate the theme, and hopefully we can share a little bit of encouragement with each other. So, thinking about racism, the first thing I must do is offer a disclaimer. I know very little about racism, coming from my privileged white Australian background as I do. And I'll also admit I don't really understand where racism comes from or why people are racist. Now, of course, I have witnessed racism. I've known people who have said and done some pretty awful things I wouldn't even repeat, let alone try and understand. And others who just make inappropriate jokes or comments that are hurtful and really unnecessary. Sometimes I find it difficult to watch the news or even movies that contain elements of racism or hatred or war. I do it from time to time, of course, because it is important. I can't ignore the hard issues, but I do find them very upsetting. And if you have ever been on the end of racist comments or actions, I am sorry. I've always believed that people are people, and we should always treat each other with kindness and compassion. We all love, laugh, cry, bleed. We all have strengths and weaknesses, joys and sorrows, struggles and triumphs. We all have people who care about us and people who we care for. There is only one race on this planet Earth, the human race. And therefore there is no place and no need for racism. It has been said that racists aren't born, but they're made. And so I thank all of you, and I thank the UN for the work being done to help end racism and build peace. I saw this meme recently which kind of sums it up for me. I love you. If people can hate for no reason, then I can love. It's simple, but it's not always easy. But what we do each day and what we don't do, what we say every day and what we don't say, it matters. We can choose to make this place a little better, a little friendlier, a little more caring, or we can spread hate, exclusion, and indifference. In South Africa, at the end of apartheid, Reverend Tutu was part of a nationwide Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It was their goal to help that country face the future without being dragged down by the pain, resentment, and angers of the past. It meant facing their racism and the systems that not only allowed it but encouraged it head on. In his book, No Future Without Forgiveness, Reverend Tutu says it is crucial when a relationship has been damaged that the perpetrator should acknowledge the truth and be ready and willing to apologise. It helps the process of forgiveness and reconciliation immensely. It is never easy. We all know just how difficult it is to admit when we're wrong. It is perhaps the most difficult thing in the world. In every language, at every stage of our development, at every age, whatever we are, no matter where we are, no matter who we are, sometimes the most difficult words are, I am sorry. Reverend Tutu goes on to say, forgiving and being reconciled are not about pretending that things are other than they are. It is not patting one another on the back and turning a blind eye to the wrong. True reconciliation exposes the awfulness, the abuse, the pain, the degradation, and the truth. It is a risky undertaking, but in the end it is worthwhile. Because in the end, dealing with the real situation helps to bring real healing. Which brings us back to the Fujita story. Just 14 years after the end of World War II, Mr. Fujita is using his pacifist beliefs, his skills, and his company to say, I am sorry to Darwin and to Australia for the damage that his country caused here. A quick summary of maybe not so quick, a summary of the Fujita story. We call it the sequel story to the bombing of Darwin. After World War II, there were multiple shipwrecks left in Darwin Harbour, and they were blocking the shipping lanes. The Australian government put out 2 worldwide tenders for someone to come and salvage and clear those wrecks. Absolutely no one was interested in the job, except Mr. Fujita. He had already approached the government separately to those tenders. And the Australian government said, no, we don't want a Japanese company coming back to do that. But eventually they had to relent because there was nobody else to do the work and it really needed to be done. The work was not easy. We have 8-metre tides and murky water, and back in 1959 the technology was not so great. They were still diving using the big helmets and weights with the oxygen being fed to them. And so from 1959 to 1961, Mr. Fujita and his 120 workers, only 6 of whom were actually divers, lived and worked in Darwin, clearing the harbour. The first job they tackled when they arrived was to raise the British motorist. This beautiful dust clout. They built a shack on top of it, and this became their accommodation while they were here. But it was not just their accommodation. It became their hub for hospitality. And despite language barriers and Australian ill feelings towards all Japanese due to those atrocities of the war, they still managed to offer friendship, peace, and reconciliation. I love that the 2 flags are flying there together. They invited distinguished guests on board, guests like Governor-General Viscount Dunrussell and Dame Patty Menzies, who was the wife of the Prime Minister at the time, and while she was in Darwin was also at the church opening, officially opening our church. But more importantly, they also invited the people of Darwin to come aboard. They enjoyed sushi and sake, Japanese beer. And there was at least one friendship that's beside the connection with the church that managed to endure until today. There's quite a few photos, and this is only some of them, of visitors on board the British Motorist. So, one day, while working on the shore, Mr. Fujita knocked on the door of a house. He wanted to ask for a match. And the person who answered the door did not freak out that there was a Japanese person at their doorstep. She did not call him names or tell him to go away. She was not afraid. And instead of leaving Mr. Fujita on the doorstep while she went in to get said matches, she invited him in and offered him hospitality. Cool drinks and conversations were shared, and an enduring friendship began. This is a photo of Barbara and her daughter here at the Fujita Hall. It was taken in 2019 when the extended Fujita family came to visit. Barbara has since passed away, but the Fujitas are still in contact with her daughter. So, slipping back to 1960, at the opening of the church, we received a gift of 77 crosses. These were made from bronze salvaged from the Zealandia. They were the main gift of peace and reconciliation from Japan to Australia. And we think that there are a number of crosses related to the Bible verse. In Matthew 18, 21 to 22, we read, "Then Peter came to Jesus and asked, 'How many times should I forgive? Up to 7 times?' And Jesus answered, 'I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times. And Peter thought he was being pretty generous with 7, so Jesus always puts us on our butt. Anyway, at the church opening, we had the ambassador, the Japanese ambassador to Australia, Mr. Narita, and he said, "Now, half a generation later, I greet with pleasure the establishment of friendly relations between Australia and Japan." And Mr. Fujita said that he was grateful that the gifts would help peace and goodwill between Japan and Australia. And these 2 Japanese gentlemen and the head of the Australian RSL were all sitting together on the platform. And for many in the crowd, this was the beginning of forgiveness and hope. Because if the head of the RSL was willing to forgive and look to the future, maybe they could too. And this story still brings hope today. We are a memorial church to all those who lost their lives in this region during the war. And this was the building that was on this site. It was the American Army headquarters, and it took a direct hit on 19th of February 1942. The atrocities of what happened during the war are still acknowledged. They are not swept under the rug, because it is in acknowledging the atrocities that the act of reparation for the damage done and the gifts of peace and reconciliation take on deeper meaning and appreciation, and something that is expressed in this letter that was given to Mr. Fujita by the administrator of the Northern Territory as they were about to leave. It says, "Most of all, you are to be congratulated upon the conduct of your men, coming as they did to a place of recent war between our 2 nations. I believe that their diligence and skill at work and their good example their good behaviour and friendliness ashore, and your good example of cooperation and goodwill have done much to create good relations. Indeed, my assistant administrator, Mr. Marsh, who has been in close touch with your work throughout, has informed me that he has not heard of any instance to the contrary. You and your company leave Darwin with my very good wishes. The Administrator, Roger Knott, July 1961. We have many locals and tourists who come through these displays, and they are all moved by the story. Many people who come through the displays also share their family stories and their connections with the war or with Darwin. Many people share how they wish their grandfather, father, uncle, or other family member could have known about this story so that it could have brought them some comfort and peace. And many people comment how they didn't even know Darwin was bombed, let alone that there was peace and reconciliation gifts given afterwards. But they are all encouraged that one person can make a difference, that reconciliation can happen after conflict. They are encouraged by the bravery of the Japanese for coming and for undertaking the hard work, and not just clearing the physical scars of war, but starting on the emotional ones as well. And they are encouraged by the acceptance and forgiveness that the Darwin community showed, and that gives them hope for peace for the future. One way we can have hope for the future comes from the second part of today's theme, to build peace. Sometimes when I start thinking about peace, I can actually become anxious and depressed and pretty overwhelmed by the hatred and lack of peace in this world. Human capacity to hurt other humans, it seems endless. Sometimes it seems like we will just never learn. And yet, the human capacity to love and show compassion is also immeasurable. We may not be able to end war across the seas, but we can make a difference to those around us every day. And it begins with peace within ourselves. Talking about peace has slipped me into sermon mode, so I hope you will forgive me. But how do we build peace within ourselves? For those of us with faith, it can come from connecting with the Spirit. It can come from knowing that we are all connected through that Spirit, and not just humans, but all of creation. Whereabouts in nature do you feel peace? Is it in the mountains, looking at the ocean, in a garden, watching a sunset? Which animals do you feel an affinity with? What is your favourite plant? We are all connected. And even if we don't have faith, if we can come to terms that even with all of our weaknesses, we are each unique, special, and enough, we gain peace. Our capacity to build peace, forgiveness, and love with those around us is dramatically increased when we can find peace, love, and forgiveness within us. There's a quote from the Quaker John Calvi from 2003. "The more patience and tolerance you have for the aspects of yourself for which you are not comfortable, the more patience you are going to have for the next person. In the quiet of your soul, are you at peace with who you are? Have you forgiven yourself for mistakes that you've made? Are you able to offer peace to others? There are some tips here that I found in a book called Practicing Peace. In it, they suggest that we be prepared to listen to others, for everyone has been on a journey. Listen to yourself and learn to trust your inner voice. Build your self-respect and your respect for others. Be patient and persistent. Build your capacity for honesty and for caring. Pause and give yourself time before acting or reacting. And when you have done wrong, admit it, make amends, and then let it go. Surround yourself with friends who support you. Risk changing yourself. And make a list of things that you are grateful for. Now, I thought as a joint peace-building exercise, we could actually make a list now, an acrostic. Call out some of the things that you're grateful for that begin with the letters of grateful. I got us started by putting United Nations in for that year. Anyone have anything that they're grateful for that starts with G? Oh.
We'll say God.
It's not going to let me type it in there because I've got it on the screen. Grateful for God. Relationships and relations. A. Accepting. Animals. Yeah. T. Trees. Thank goodness for the oxygen from the trees. E. Every day. Grateful every day. U. United Nations. Umbrellas when it's raining. Or when it's too sunny up here. L. Loving. So, we actually end racism by building relationships and breaking down the barriers of ignorance and fear. When we are at peace with ourselves, we have no need to try and make ourselves feel superior by putting others down. There we go. Inspired by the Fujita example, I hope you are encouraged, even a little bit, to think about how you can end racism and build peace in your corner of influence. Together, we can build peace, and with peace, end racism. We know we have a long way to go, so let us hasten along the road of human tenderness and generosity. Groping, we may find one another's hands in the dark. It's a quote from Emily Green Balch in 1955. And now I invite you to come forward and light a candle. It could be a candle of forgiveness, or you could be lighting it to symbolise a commitment to end racism and build peace. And I have some pledges here as well. The pledge says, I will, at every opportunity, work towards eliminating racism from my thoughts, my speech, my actions, my home and society as a whole. I acknowledge I have both privileges and biases, but I will work towards promoting values such as fairness, justice, freedom, safety, peace, equality, dignity, and community. So I invite you to light a candle and take a pledge. You can add your own pledge at the bottom, or you can take it home and give it to your grandkids to colour in. You can put it up on your fridge, whatever you like. There's a few of those there. So I invite you to come forward, light a candle, take a pledge, and then as we go, feel free to continue the conversation with those around you.